time goes all the way down there. We'll just run off 30 seconds at the top. Just let it run for a minute. Camera A, take 1. She's really cool. She's nice lighting. Yeah, she's nice. She's very smart. She did a. Camera A, take 1. I better break out 2 tapes. Bowls.
So the time code's down here. There's 30.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Good evening. I'm Mike Wallace. I'm the director of the Gotham Center for New York City History. And for those of you who are coming to one of our events for the first time, I should just say that this is part of a regular series of programs, some of which, like this evening, like to look at contemporary issues and set them in historical context, mixing and matching past and present. Others focus on new and interesting historical scholarship. And our next event is on April 26th, and seemingly in a remarkably different direction, which is the history of spiritualism in New York. Although, in fact, in its day, it had seriously scientific components to it. But we'll leave that for then. We have many, many other projects that we do, and one of the places that you go to find out about it is our website at the W's, GothamCenter.org, alas.com. You make no money on the deal, but what we do is try to provide public service information. So there is on this site, among other things, a calendar of events. You can click on any day of the year, and you will get information about lectures, museum exhibitions, a whole variety of things that deal with the history of New York City. GothamCenter.org. Now, tonight we have a wonderful event on water, its supply then and now, and we are delighted to be co-sponsoring this event with 2 crucial organizations. One of them is the High Bridge Coalition, which I should remind you, if you don't know, is dedicated to restoring and preserving the High Bridge, reestablishing it as the Manhattan-Bronx link to the old Aqueduct Trail Greenway, and restoring the parks at both ends of the bridge. There's a whole list of organizations, and I'm sure many of their members are here this evening. The other agency is a crucial public organization, the Department of Environmental Protection, and I'm delighted to introduce, to welcome you here this evening, Commissioner Emily Lloyd. Commissioner Lloyd has had a long and distinguished career in the public and the private sector. She was the Commissioner for Traffic for the City of Boston. I guess that was before the big dig, luckily. Then she served as the Director of Business Development at the Port Authority of New York. She was a commissioner in an earlier life of the Department of Sanitation under David Dinkins from 92 to 94. I was involved, I believe, in getting recycling off the ground. Then she spent several years as Executive Vice President for Administration at Columbia University. And now the city is, I believe, fortunate in having her at the Department of Environmental Protection. Please welcome Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to see you all here tonight. I consider it a great privilege and challenge to have the opportunity to be Commissioner of DEP because I've only been Commissioner for 2 months, and for that reason I'm not able to stay tonight because I had a commitment that I made before I was Commissioner. But I just want to say that I understand this is being recorded in some form, and it's going to be such an informative and lively evening that I intend to listen to it. So please speak up when you make your comments, because I'll look forward, whether they are positive about DEP or not, I'll look forward to hearing them. This year, DEP is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the creation of the New York City Board of Water Supply. Establishing the board allowed the city to expand its water supply beyond the Croton system, the city's original source of drinking water, to include the Catskill and Delaware watersheds in upstate New York. As part of that celebration, I'd like to thank you for coming to this evening's event, a discussion of the past, present, and future of New York City's water supply system, entitled A Study in the Monumental. Tonight's panel, the first of two planned programs, is co-sponsored by the Gotham Center and the Highland Bridge Coalition, which is spearheading a campaign to restore and reopen the High Bridge as well as the parks at both the Bronx and Manhattan ends of the bridge. Structures like the High Bridge, which carried water from the old Croton Aqueduct across the Harlem River, survive as reminders of the true visionaries who conceived and constructed this lifeline to the city. The modern-day equivalent and outgrowth of the early water supply engineering is the current construction of a modern monumental feat of technology and engineering, the Third Water Tunnel, largely unseen by the general public as it burrows beneath the city anywhere from 400 to 800 feet below ground. And as I was commenting earlier, it's not a bad thing probably that it's out of sight and out of mind, because it makes it easy to keep it moving along. DEP is proud to be a member of the High Bridge Coalition, which also includes the New York City Departments of Parks and Recreation and Transportation, Friends of High Bridge Park, Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct, the new restoration project, the National Park Service, and the Partnerships for Parks. Please also keep an eye out for the second program planned for the fall, which will highlight New York City water supply system, but also explore the future of water delivery systems nationwide. We would also like to thank Mike Wallace and the Gotham Center for New York City History for co-sponsoring and hosting this evening. This event and the conference this fall will provide an opportunity both to remember and honor an important and invaluable part of New York City's history and allow us to explore the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Thank you.
Now, for the remainder of the evening, I'm going to turn the moderator's duties over to perhaps the best qualified person for the job, Gerard Coppell, who is a writer and a journalist, at one point an editor at CBS News, but he is better known as our premier historian of the water supply of New York City. As I'm sure most of you know, his Water for Gotham history came out in the year 2000, and it traces the history of drinking water in New York City. And it received a bundle of well-merited laudatory reviews. The New York Times called it extraordinarily well-researched and remarkably readable. Library Journal called it a fascinating play-by-play tale. The New York Observer said it was most certainly not a book for New Yorkers only. So I'm going to ask Mr. Coppell to introduce our fascinating and distinguished panel and direct the remainder of the evening. Thank you so much for coming, and have fun.
Thanks for that introduction. Thanks, Commissioner Lloyd, for coming and saying a few important words about our city's water supply. I'm going to be the first talker, but I'm going to introduce you to all the talkers in the panel, and then we can go from presentation to presentation quickly, and hopefully have time for some question and answer afterwards. After my talk, Joel Mealy will go. Joe has been an engineer, I think, since before I was born. He was the commissioner of the city's Department of Environmental Protection from 1996 to 2002. Before that, he was the city's building commissioner. And since 2002, Joel has been the commissioner of the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals. Joel is going to focus this evening on the Catskill and Delaware systems, their history and engineering, efforts at conservation of our water supply, and also the future of the city's water supply system generally. After Joel, we'll hear from Diane DeLucia. She is the author of Liquid Assets, a history of New York City's water system, published by Purple Mountain Press in 1999. Our books are both the best books on the current best books on New York City's water supply. She's the communication director and education coordinator of the nonprofit Catskill Watershed Corporation, which administers environmental protection, economic development, and education programs in the city's Catskill, Delaware watershed. She is going to give us the view from the watershed, a perspective that is often blurred here in the city. Robert Kornfeld will be our next speaker. He's an architect and an associate of the Thornton Tomasetti Group. He's vice president of the Friends of the Old Croton Aqueduct, and he was the historian and co-author of the recently published map and guide, The Old Croton Aqueduct in New York City. Bob is going to tell us about the history of the Great High Bridge, which Commissioner Lloyd made reference to, and he will trace it from its creation in the 1830s for the Croton system up to its pending rebirth as a place of urban recreation. After that, we'll hear from Michael Solomon. Michael is the director of roadway bridges for the City of New York Department of Transportation. This is a $1 billion capital program. He's going to tell us about the engineering inspection of the High Bridge, which is ongoing and hopefully will lead to, at some point in the future, the recreation of the High Bridge as a recreational place. And finally, we'll hear from Dale Estes. Dale is a second-generation sandhog. I think probably most of you know what that is. Sandhogs are the guys that get down there and build our tunnels. He's a 34-year member of Local 147, employed for the last 2 decades on the third water tunnel, which Commissioner Lloyd referred to. He's currently the tunnel superintendent for Schiavone Shea Frontier Kemper, and working, Dale is now at shaft 26B. And Dale's talk will be about the work of the sandhog and how it has changed and evolved over the past 30 years. So now, I will go first, and this is the history portion. I just want to tell you that each of the speakers is supposed to be limited to 15 minutes, so we will have time for Q&A. I usually do my history talk, it's 45 minutes. I think I've got it down to 15. A couple of weeks ago, our family was skiing out in Utah. And by the way, Salt Lake City gets its water from snowpack, which I discovered when I was out there. And we had a 4-foot snowfall one day. We were locked in our lodge, we couldn't move. And our 12-year-old son decided to organize all the kids at the lodge and have keep them busy during the day. And came up with a presentation for the adults just before dinner. It was called The History of the World in 30 Minutes, which he succeeded in doing. And he told me that I should at least be able to get through the history of New York City water in 15. So let's get started and see if I can figure out the technology.
He took me halfway through my talk. I think that one of the things that we have to recognize about the New York City water system as a fundamental issue is that there are very few systems like it where essentially what you're drinking when you drink it is rainwater. And when you're finished with it, it goes out of the receiving waters, the slow water in New York Harbor, gets transpired back into the clouds again, and then drops again as rain. So this is one of the few water systems where water is used by only one individual or one city, one municipality at a time. Most of the water systems in the world, riverine systems, are used by city after city after city after city. Also because most of it is taken out of wells, most of it tends to have minerals, metals in it, and what have you. Because basically what we're drinking is rainwater, which generally is very pure, very soft, and it is a unique system. Largest system, by the way, that we're aware of in the world. I guess what I need to talk about at this point is that when the Croton system went into play, the city finally, for the first time, had an ability to bring water down from an area outside of its own boundaries that they knew was pure. And as a result of that, as a result of the fact that bright people who preceded us in running what is today DEP and various other municipal agencies and state agencies that assist us, basically mean that this city can exist, because if the water system did not exist, this city would not last 2 months. There is no way to maintain a population density such as we have here without this water system. And you know the age of it, you've already heard the age of it, you've heard the beginnings of it. After the old Croton system, or the original Croton system, was built and the dam was built, the city began to take an enormous interest and liking in the consumption of water. And it started consuming water to the point where there was beginning to be less water available than they really needed. And the first decision was made to go back to the Croton system, go down river from where the dam was, build a higher dam, and impound a larger reservoir behind it. And that was done, and the capacity of the system went from 75 million gallons a day up to 400 million gallons a day when the new Croton Aqueduct was completed and started, and the dam was completed and started flooding with water. By now, the old Croton Dam, by the way, is still in place in the reservoir and occasionally can be seen when the conditions are right. But we had now a thirst for water, if I can coin a phrase, and immediately after the completion of the new Croton system, it became apparent we needed more water. And you will hear about the tumult that engendered when we got outside of our own area and got further and further afield and got more and more ability to take water. Because the city of New York uniquely has extraterritoriality rights to take water from outside its own boundaries, and it has the right by a grant from the state legislature to go wherever it needs to get water and to take it. That you heard earlier what kind of problems were engendered in what is today the Bronx when we went in and decided to build the Croton system. When you take a look and you saw on the slides the size of the systems that are west of the Hudson, you get some idea of the amount of people who were impacted, even though the population, even to this day, is fairly thin. But there were a lot of people involved and a lot of people negatively impacted by what we were doing. In any event, we started construction on the Delaware and the Catskill systems. The Catskill system was started in 1907, completed in 1917, with expansion in 1926. Capacity now 550 million gallons a day from that system. So you can see the size of what's occurring. Why did the systems become necessary? You've heard of this phrase, Greater New York City, which goes back to 1898, and every once in a while someone sees the logo of the Greater New York and it says 1898 on it. That's when Brooklyn, which was using well water and pond water from Nassau County, what is today Queens County, and even as far out east as Suffolk County, found itself unable to keep the system functioning, did not have adequate water supply to fight fires, had a very poor quality of water, and were told that if they joined the city of New York, they could have that wonderful water that comes from the north. The vote of the Brooklyn City Council was by one vote. That's how contested it was for the city. And the city of Brooklyn decided to join the city of New York at that point in time. And we needed to expand the water supply system rapidly because the population of the city of New York had now doubled as a result of that. And we now had 3.5 million people in the city of New York. The Catskill system, as I said, was started in 1907, completed in 1917. Water now travels over 100 miles into the city from the north and through a tunnel that runs underneath the Hudson River, 1,100 feet deep. Keep in mind, and you'll hear from the sandhogs later, that this is primarily, at this point in time that we're talking about, hand labor. Yes, they had explosives, but besides explosives, they had shovels, they had picks, and they had strong backs. There's another interesting thing. You heard earlier that it was primarily Irish immigrants who built the system. Most of you may not be aware of it, but a good number of you are. But New York City DEP has its own police department. That police department today protects the system, but that's not what it was put together for. The origin of the Department for New York City was to protect the residents in the watershed area where the aqueducts were being built against the wild Irish immigrants on Friday and Saturday night. Political compromises are large and small. The Delaware system was started in 1937. It was just a continuous increase in the size of the population that required it. It was stopped, obviously, during World War II. It had neither labor nor material to be completed. It was completed in 1965. That system has a capacity of 800 million gallons a day. We're now talking about a total capacity in the three systems of 1.5 billion gallons per day. Water tunnels 1 and 2 provide water. When the Croton system was in place, only the Croton aqueduct and was necessary because of the areas that were served by it. But when the Delaware system and the Catskill system were built, it was necessary to distribute the water further down, south and east into the outer boroughs. And Tunnel 1 and Tunnel 2 were started. Tunnel 1 obviously running through Manhattan. Tunnel 2 ultimately running through Queens and ending up at the Hillview Reservoir, through the Bronx, through Queens, and terminating in the area of the Brooklyn end of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, where it connects to the only source of water, only reliable source of water, to Staten Island, which is the Richmond Tunnel, which was completed in 1936. Up until that time, there was no water available to Staten Island from off the island itself, and you had to use the local wells and the local ponds for water. It's interesting, by the way, the system is so set up that the city, which overnight basically sends water down to fill up the reservoirs that we use, finds out that when it, by gravity, runs the water into the Staten Island tanks, the department has to basically shut down the valving on it on an overnight basis, because otherwise, as Brooklyn people woke up in the morning and started using water, they would suck the water back out of the Staten Island pipe, and the poor folks in Staten Island didn't have any water. The one problem with the system, and by the way, understand that the tunnel systems are bare. There is no pipe. There's no structure to them. They are holes bored through living rock. The only thing that's been put on the inside of them where necessary is basically a concrete grout to decrease the coefficient of friction so that the water flows and gives better pressure. But there's no units that are in those water tunnels. It's bare rock. So it is. Until the Big Dig in Boston, which you heard of a little bit earlier here, I think they were talking about the commissioner and the Big Dig in Boston. This was the largest, Tunnel 3 was the largest civil works project in the world. A 50-year project, $6 billion price tag, and a 60-mile length. And it was started in 1970. This is 2005. The hope and expectation, I hope Charlie is still will have it completed in the year 2020. God willing, and the river doesn't rise. What does Tunnel 3 give us? Tunnel 3 for the first time gives us not a linear water system, but a circular water system. It doesn't take a great deal of engineering knowledge to know that if you have a linear system running water from one end to the other, and you have a breakage or a blockage or a problem someplace in the middle, no water comes out the other end of the pipe. But with a circular system, if you get a break or any kind of a problem anywhere in the loop, the water can go the other way around the loop. So for the first time, you have the redundancy of having a loop rather than a linear system. The system, by the way, was designed to be fully completed before it was to be turned on at all. And back in about 1998, that struck me since stage 1 was completed, just laying there. It struck me as odd because we could use the water, we could use the pressure, and we could use the redundancy. And at my request, changes were made to the design so that we could turn on stage 1, and we in fact did turn on stage 1, which is presently in service and brings water from the Bronx down to Manhattan, and then finally terminates in Astoria in Queens at a valve chamber there. Stage 2 runs from Astoria to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel through Brooklyn and Queens. That stage 2, the boring of that was completed in about 2001. The shafts are now under construction, and the stage 2 should be activated within 4 or 5 years. The second part of stage 2, which is from Central Park to the Battery and up to the 30s in a loop, it's kind of official, is now being tunneled. There will be some time before that's completed, but it's a smaller tunnel because it's at the lower end of the system, and as a result, it's not as big a diameter tunnel as stage 1 was, so it's probably moving faster. Plans call for a final stage 4 to take water from the Van Cortlandt Park valve chamber, which is obviously under Van Cortlandt Park, to Eastern Queens to possibly serve the development of Eastern Queens and maybe, and I'll talk about it a little later, possibly some of the counties to the east of there. Let me talk to you for a few minutes about the Delaware Aqueduct leak. The Delaware Aqueduct provides the source of water from the Delaware system down into New York City. When it finally went into service in the late 50s, there was a problem with the gauging. For some reason, they couldn't get the gauges to jive correctly, and eventually they determined to shut the tunnel off, which they did. Went into the tunnel and found that they basically had a leak west of the Hudson at an area where there was a fault in the rock, which they had sleeved, the only part of the tunnel that has any structure to it at all. They put a sleeve in it for some 100 feet on either side of what they believed to be the fault, but apparently it wasn't effective enough to solve the problem, and that aqueduct has been leaking fairly steadily since 1957. Depending upon the amount of water that flows down it, and that is the needs of you and I as we use the water, there is as much as 35 million gallons a day lost. Now, the system capacity is 1.5 billion gallons, as I told you. So 35 to 38 million gallons per day doesn't sound like a lot of water, but it's a significant amount of water if you dropped into it, let's put it that way. It's not something I think we should be proud of, and we determined that we would seal that leak. Let me say one other thing. The normal leakage for water systems in the United States, believe it or not, runs around 20%. That is 20% of the water that is source water gets lost in the system someplace, somewhere. That does not include losses in your property and my property. It's in the system itself. The New York City system at this time, including the Delaware leak, is about 6% leakage. So we've got a very tight system. We also have one of the oldest systems in the United States because of where we are in the country and where the country was developed from. So that also is a situation that we have to deal with. One of the concerns that we have is how do we solve that leaking problem, and the department has basically entered into a contract with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. They built a miniature submarine. It is an untethered submarine, which means you just drop it in and it runs through the aqueduct. And it has the capability on board to take photographs and various other measurements. It can be changed, there are different modules that can be put into it, and the department is, as we speak, trying to analyze what it's going to do and how is the best way to resolve the problem. I had an interesting conversation with the then Commissioner of DEC, the state agency, when we were talking about this leak, because one of the things I pointed out to him was that when we cured that leak, there were significant numbers of ponds, springs, and rivulets that people at the surface thought were steady and were going to be natural and were shut down. And it's against the law in New York State to change your water course. He said to me, I'll have to think about that, and I think he left his job about 2 months later. That didn't work out. But it's going to be interesting. The major concern with the leak, from our perspective, is while it's a fairly contained and stable leak now, at some point in the future it could destabilize, we could get some rock breaking free around the fault, it could partially clog the aqueduct, reducing the water supply. That's not something we want to face, so we do want to see if we can't resolve the issue. We are talking about 50% of the water supply, so you know. Since we're talking about the issue of needing water and wanting to make sure that we've got it, let me talk a little bit about citywide water conservation initiatives. One of the problems that we had, and I think there are a number of us here who would remember it, when Donald wanted to build the West Side project, one of the big issues was there going to be enough water to handle that? And one of the big problems was that the capability at the North River wastewater treatment plant was not going to be adequate to handle it. To make a long story short, one of the things we recognized was that if we could reduce the flow of water from the system into the wastewater system, we could reduce the size of the wastewater plants and improve their efficiency. So the city embarked through DEP upon a program of encouraging people to install low-flow toilets at a point in time when they had basically just come out onto the scene. And in fact, they agreed to pay for the installation of a low-flow toilet for anyone who was willing to replace a high-flow toilet with one. And there was a rebate program established. That program effectively changed about 25% of the toilets in the city of New York from wasteful toilets down to 1.6 gallons per flush. By the way, some of them work well, some of them work not so good. People learn which ones work well, and most of them today, I think, are very functional.
Exactly.
However, in addition to that, we have a stable population of about 8 million people. It hasn't gone up. If we can reduce the capacity of the amount of water being consumed, we obviously can save not only on the water itself, have an extra supply, but we can also reduce our costs in handling the whole problem. The conservation measures taken included that. By the time we had gotten to about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the consumption had gone over 2 billion gallons per day total. Consumption is down considerably from that. We're down to about 1.6 billion gallons. That's a 20% reduction. It's now stable. You are not able any longer at a plumbing supply house to buy a wasteful toilet. You must buy a low-flow toilet, which means that the other 75% of the toilets that are in the city will, as time evolves and renovations take place and condominiums get converted into, there will be an additional constant saving of water. We also decided that another measure would be highly effective would be to call for universal metering. Most people who were residential tenants and residential occupants did not have meters. They paid on a frontage basis. And I lived in Howard Beach, and I had 2 old houses on either side of me, and I built a new home, and I had a water meter. And it didn't dawn on me what they were doing. This is many years ago. But one of my neighbors one morning came out and said, if you ever need to wash your car, use my hose. Well, that doesn't encourage the saving of water, obviously, because he doesn't care what he uses. He's paying the same amount for it, whether he uses twice as much or less. He's got a meter now. He doesn't loan me, so. Okay. I think one other thing we can talk about is the old Jamaica water supply well system in South Queens. We took that over about 6 years ago. I think that's about right. Because Jamaica water supply basically could not supply adequate volume of water and could supply adequate quality of water. And we had been blending and selling them city water for a period of time before that because they couldn't meet the health standards. When we eventually took it over, we were able to continue to use that. And I think one of the things we're looking at is the greater usage of well water, because with modern science and modern technology, we can get a much better quality out of well water than they could back in the colonial days and going much further than that. So we are looking into that. The other thing is that the eastern branch of the third water tunnel, as I told you, goes into Queens. And one of the things I think most people know about but don't think about is that Nassau and Suffolk have a limited capability to provide potable water, and it has not been increasing. Because as the population of Nassau and Suffolk increase, the aquifers beneath it from which they take their water tend to become more and more polluted with various waste items and soaps and what have you. And as they pump more and more water out of the aquifers, the salt waterfronts from both the ocean and the Long Island Sound tend to keep moving towards the center spine of the island. And I think they've got fundamental problem that may not occur in your lifetime or my lifetime, but I think it will occur in the lifetime of my grandchildren. And the bottom line is, I don't see any solution for it other than taking water from Connecticut, which becomes an interstate problem, running it underneath Long Island Sound, or basically tying it into our system and having us a system. And one of the things we have been looking at, or were looking at when I was at the agency, was the idea of using some of the water that we tend to get in this weather right now. If you go up to the aqueduct and look at the reservoirs now, you find most of the reservoirs are spilling water over the dam because they're full. That water is now going out into the Hudson River and eventually ends up in the ocean. It's totally wasted. If we could pump that water into the aquifers in Nassau County, we could store the water there for our future use if we need it, help stabilize Nassau County's salt waterfront, help provide them with a better source of pure water, etc. And if Nassau County and Suffolk County don't wake up to this fairly soon, and I tried to wake them up to it when I was commissioner, but the bottom line is at some point they're going to scream to some governor that they need help, and we need to be able to be prepared to answer that call. The future, we talked about the Delaware Aqueduct leak. That's a linear system. There's no circular system. One of the things the agency is looking at, and the agency, by the way, plans for 50 years from now and 100 years from now, because that's how long it takes to plan, build, and put a project online of the size that we're talking about. Third water tunnel was 50 years we talked about. We want to do something else like that again if we can. And one of the things we're looking at is a second aqueduct from west of the Hudson, under the Hudson, into the terminal reservoir, so that we again have a parallel system, so that we need to get into one of the aqueducts, say the Delaware Aqueduct, to make repairs. We can shut it down for a year if we have to, and use the second aqueduct. So we are looking at that. We're looking at again a well system running from the old city of Brooklyn's forest supply. That's just about perfect. Thank you. Nobody's throwing me out of here. One of the things that you may not be aware of if you don't live in South Queens or South Brooklyn is that we used to have a systemic drought in this area going back to the 60s and 70s. That systemic drought is well over. Those of us who have gone through the last few years know full well that it's over. And what's happening is the groundwater elevations in South Queens and South Brooklyn have rebounded over 30 feet in elevation in the last 10 to 15 years. Buildings that were designed 20 years ago that had cellars now have swimming pools. So we, the City of New York and the MTA, pump water out of the ground, pump it into the city's sewers, and spill it and waste it, because they need to do that in order to keep their facilities dry. So one of the things that the agency is looking at is developing a system of wells that would run east and west through Brooklyn and Queens, that we could then take water out of, adding it to the supply system for the City of New York, and making the city that much safer. Last one I'll talk about is, and it has nothing to do with the potable water supply system per se, it's much bigger in the wastewater, but it's important to remember. Here we are on 34th Street and 5th Avenue. In the year 2000, I was sitting in 5th Avenue and 20th Street in water up to my knees. The entire street was full of water because a 36-inch main had gone right in. And I said to the agency, well, all we need to do is to put a new main in. And they said, who's going to tell the merchants on 5th Avenue that we're digging up 5th Avenue, blocking it off, and we'll probably not be able to reopen it for 18 months? Okay. And the answer is nobody wants to be that. So what the agency is looking at now is ways to do trenchless technology so that they can horizontally put these in by either sleeving the existing pipes that are there, or by pushing a pipe in front of it by hydraulic pressure so that they can avoid having to open the streets in the heavily urban areas of Leicester. And I guess that's pretty much what I've got to say today.